So I just had a long discussion with Jocko Willink, and Jocko states very forthrightly in that interview, that discussion, that ever since he was 3 years old, he wanted to be a soldier, and he disavows any higher order moral virtue to that desire. He wanted to go out and be a soldier, to do what soldiers do. It was intrinsic. It was an intrinsic part of his personality. And make no mistake about it, I mean, we've been warriors forever, and some people are born like that. And he's definitely one of them. But he's highly socialized. We get less aggressive as we age, human beings. The most violent creatures are 2-year-olds. Punch, kick, hit, bite, steal. That's the definition. Physical violence. Okay. 2-year-olds, if you group people together in age similar groupings, the 2-year-olds have the most violent altercations. But then if you look at the 2-year-olds, it's a minority of the 2-year-olds who are violent. They're almost all male, and it's a small minority of the males. Okay, most of those males are socialized out of that antisocial aggression by the time they're 4. Those that aren't are permanently antisocial, although that declines after the age of about 27. So let's take that minority of aggressive kids. So, well, what does it mean to be aggressive? And this pertains to psychopathy. Psychopathy isn't a unitary dimension. It's not a personality attribute. It's a combination of traits. And so a real psychopath is low in agreeableness. So low in compassion, low in politeness. That's the best personality predictor of criminal behavior. It's not very good, but it's the best one. And they're low in conscientiousness. Okay, so they have a parasitic lifestyle, that's low in conscientiousness, and they have no empathy. That's bad news. And then you can decorate the psychopathy. You could add low neuroticism to that, so there's no fear. You could add assertiveness from the extroversion dimension. So like your ultimate psychopath might be charming and assertive, right? Low in fear, low in agreeableness, low in conscientiousness. So they don't care about you. They'll exploit you for the future. They don't forego gratification, but they're charming. Then you can decompose that and you can say, well, those constituent elements of those traits are often extremely useful. Now, Jocko and his crew, the Navy SEAL types, they're deadly when you put them out against an enemy, but they're unbelievably socialized. Like Jocko stated very straightforwardly and makes a very credible case that the Navy SEALs their fundamental motivation isn't status for themselves, it's to protect the other people in the group. They're incredibly group affiliated, and I think you see that in any functional group of competitive men, is they compete for the position, but they have each other's backs. And if they don't, what you do with a guy like that, who you can't trust in the clinch, is you isolate him. Even if he's competent, if he won't subserve that competence to the group, you don't trust him, because in order to be in a position of authority for any length of time, you have to play an iterable game. It has to be able to repeat. And unless you engage in reciprocal behaviors with others, you can't dominate a social group for very long, because it'll rebel. So there's real constraints on the exercise of power in any functional hierarchy. And you even see that among chimps. Franz de Waal has documented this extremely well. The tyrant chimp can prevail momentarily, but the probability that he's going to get taken out is extremely high. And it's actually the pro-social chimp who's strong and fearless, let's say, that's much more likely to have a stable reign, let's say. So you can even see that in chimps. So I'm leery of the, CEOs equal psychopath argument. It's like, well, yeah, they're competitive, but they're conscientious. So that ameliorates the psychopathy, right? Like a disagreeable, conscientious person is really useful to have around, because they will tell you exactly what they think, because they don't care if they hurt your feelings. And that's kind of harsh. They will tell you, man, you'll know. But if they're conscientious, you can trust them. One of the things that happens very often in psychotherapy, people come to psychotherapy for multiple reasons, but one of them is they often come because they're too agreeable. And so what they get is so-called assertiveness training, although it's not exactly assertiveness that's being trained. What it is the ability to learn how to negotiate on your own behalf. And one of the things I tell agreeable people, especially if they're conscientious, is
say what you think. Tell the truth about what you think. There's going to be things you think that you think are nasty and harsh. And they probably are nasty and harsh, but they're also probably true. And you need to bring those up to the forefront and deliver the message. And it's not straightforward at all, because agreeable people do not like conflict. Not at all. They smooth the water. You know, and you can see why that is, in accordance with the hypothesis that I've been putting forward. You don't want conflict around infants. It's too damn dangerous. You don't want fights to break out. You don't want anything to disturb the relative peace. You know, and if you're also more prone to being hurt physically and perhaps emotionally, you're also maybe loath to engage in the kind of high-intensity conflict that will solve problems in the short term. Because it takes a lot of conflict to solve problems in the short term. And, you know, if that can spiral up to where it's dangerous, which it can if it gets uncontrolled, it might be safer in the short term to keep the waters smooth and to not delve into those situations where conflict emerges. The problem with that is it's not a very good medium to long-term strategy, right? Because lots of times there are things you have to talk about because they're not going to go away. And so partly what you do with agreeable people is you get them to figure out, and they have a hard time with this too. If you ask a disagreeable person what he wants, say, or she wants, they'll tell you right away. They know. It's like, this is what I want and this is how I'm going to get it. But agreeable people, especially if they're really agreeable, are so agreeable that they often don't even know what they want, because they're so accustomed to living for other people and to finding out what other people want and to trying to make them comfortable and so forth, that it's harder for them to find a sense of their own desires as they move through life. And that's not, look, there's situations where that's advantageous, but it's certainly not advantageous if you're going to try to forge yourself a career. That just doesn't work at all.
This is part of the reason that I'm an admirer of Carl Jung, because Jung makes it very clear that, see, he was very interested in the barriers to enlightenment. Because if there's such a thing as being enlightened, let's say, then why isn't everyone enlightened? If it's just a matter of taking the glorious route and following your bliss, let's say, it's like, well, that sounds pretty easy. Why isn't everyone enlightened? But Jung's thinking isn't like that at all. You know, he believed that in order to transform your personality, that first of all you had to be disciplined, that's for sure, but you also had to integrate that part of you that was terrible and capable of breaking rules and make it part of you. And so then, and I really like that idea. Well, here's an example. So about 20 years ago, I would say, there was a newspaper headline in one of Canada's major newspapers, and it was the Minister of Foreign Affairs at that time, Lloyd Axworthy, and he was talking about what had happened with Milosevic in the former Soviet Union in Yugoslavia and the atrocities that were being committed. And he said that he was caught unawares by that because he didn't have the imagination for that kind of evil. And I thought, well, you know, you think that what you're doing is signaling your virtue by making a statement like that, but from my perspective, all you're doing is stating your cowardice and your historical ignorance, because if you're going to be Minister of Foreign Affairs, you bloody well better have imagination for that kind of evil, because if you don't, then anyone who does wins. They beat you. And so you know, again, in the Harry Potter stories, you see he's touched by evil, right? He actually has a soul fragment that's embedded within him that's as black as anything can possibly be. That's why he can talk to snakes. But without that, he wouldn't be able to have any victory. And that's exactly right psychologically. Unless you can think the way that an evil person thinks, then you're defenseless against them, because they'll go places. You can't imagine, and then they win. And so the best men I've met, it was interesting even when I was in junior high and high school, because most of my friends dropped out, you know, by the time they were grade 10, thereabouts.
And a lot of them were guys who developed physically. They're pretty powerful, and they're just damn sick of putting up their hand to go to the bathroom. It's like, you know, they're not doing that anymore. One of my friends got kicked out when he sort of challenged the gym teacher, you know, physically. And the gym teacher, he could do an iron cross. He was a tough guy, and so it was no trivial matter for my friend to stand up to him, but he got expelled anyways. But, you know, I noticed that it wasn't, it was often the kids whose character I admired that either quit or got expelled, and they were the tougher guys who were just sick and tired of following rules that didn't take into account their character, and then they'd go off and work in the oil rigs or whatever, and you could do that in Alberta at that time. That was really hard work, you know, so it wasn't like they were necessarily taking the easy path. But, like, a harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very, very dangerous man who has that under voluntary control. And, you know, you also see that, like one of the central female stories, let's say, if the hero archetype is the central male story, there are very of hero archetypes that are relevant to women, and one of them is Beauty and the Beast. And, you know, Beauty isn't interested in the guy who isn't the Beast. She's interested in the guy who's the Beast, and that's exactly right, but she's interested in the guy who's the Beast that can be civilized and disciplined, right, and who can use that in the service, well, let's say, of a family.
Look, a great hunter, let's say, might become a leader in a hunter-gatherer group. But part of what makes him a great hunter is the fact that he shares. I mean, he hunts, but he has to share. And that's also to his benefit, because then if someone else hunts and is successful, he gets his share. But so there's the aggression that goes along with hunting, and the dominance that goes along with maybe the seeking of status in that particular domain. But no complex human hierarchy is sustainable without reciprocity. And that's why the Marxist criticisms of hierarchy as only based in power, they're just wrong. It's just not the case. When a hierarchy degenerates, then it becomes based on power. Any hierarchy, it could be a creative hierarchy, it could be a competency hierarchy. If it's power, then it's degenerated. It's become the evil tyrant, and then it's time for a revolution.
Tell me now, if you want to get out of my life, but delay. In my heart, there is nothing. Oh, my heart, there's no bidding. In my heart, there is nothing. Oh, my heart, there's no bidding.
So, you know, the revolutionary Marxist types can take that fundamental truth, which is that sometimes it's time for a revolution, and that's when power dominates. And they can use that as a motivator because it speaks to us very deeply. But it's very dangerous to apply that to situations where what's producing hierarchical position is multifactorial. And no one in their right mind, if they think about it, as far as I'm concerned, can say that the functional hierarchies that characterize most social organizations in the West, they're just not based on power. That's just wrong. Plumbers, competency. Lawyers, competency. Might be dominance and assertiveness and even a lack of empathy. Among prosecutors, for example, you know, you have to have a killer instinct. But it's competence, it's ability to do the job.